Hello, friends. I'm Sherri Stevens, the author of the blogs at Holy Fit Brand. I have in this episode what I really hope is a very heartfelt, encouraging message for you. It deviates from many of the topics that I've covered in the past that appeal more to head knowledge and theology. This one is much more heartfelt. I hope you find blessings and encouragement in it. So let's get started. When you feel like you don't measure up, we are often too quick to judge things, especially ourselves and our mistakes. But God's miraculous grace has a way of working even our mistakes into a masterful mosaic, orchestrating outcomes that we never could have imagined. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose." The phrase "work together" is from the Greek word synergio, from which we get the English word synergy. Synergy is the interaction of two or more substances that produces a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. Think about the compound commonly known to us as salt. Salt consists of 40% sodium and 60% chlorine. Both sodium and chloride are deadly poisons by themselves, but put them together and you have, voila, table salt. We recognize that this seemingly lethal combination produces a valuable commodity in chemistry, but could we ever expect that two poisons could be blended to produce anything beneficial in our own lives? Much like a chemist might combine chemicals that may be harmful to make a medicine that promotes healing, our great chemist can take bad things in our lives and create something good. Let's consider a few biblical characters who felt like they didn't measure up and how God used them in mighty ways. Moses described himself as slow in speech and tongue, but God assured him that he would help Moses speak and teach him what to say in Exodus 4:10 through 11. Moses went on to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. In the life of David, when Samuel was searching for the new king, David was overlooked and not even considered at first because he was in the field tending sheep in 1 Samuel 16:11. Later in David's life, he committed adultery with Bathsheba and had her husband Uriah killed. David went on to write the penitent Psalms, Psalm 32 and 51, about this episode of his life, emphasizing the joy and freedom found in confessing sins and receiving God's forgiveness, highlighting the contrast between the burden of guilt and the blessing of a cleansed conscience. Yet in all the turbulent chapters of David's life, God said of David that he was a man after my own heart in 1 Samuel 13:14. Gideon said, "My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family," when God called him to deliver Israel from the Midianites. And yet Gideon and his army went on to defeat the Midianites in Judges 6:15. The woman at the well had been married 5 times and was living with a man who was not her husband. Yet Jesus sought her out specifically to share for the first time that he was indeed the Messiah in John 4. Rahab was a Canaanite woman identified as a prostitute, yet she was included in the genealogy, making her an ancestor of Jesus in Matthew 1:5. Tamar was raped by her half-brother Amnon, and yet she was in the lineage of Jesus Christ in 2 Samuel 13. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, yet after he was restored to a relationship with Jesus, we read of him boldly preaching the gospel to a crowd in Jerusalem in Acts 2. Paul actively persecuted and imprisoned Christians, yet he wasn't buried in guilt. Instead, he went on to write 2/3 of the New Testament and boldly preached the gospel. So when we feel like we don't measure up, we're in good company with many heroes of the faith. God doesn't give his glory to another. We see all through Scripture that God uses people who humbly acknowledge that they don't measure up. It's not your ability, but your availability that matters to God. True strength comes not from our human abilities, but our reliance on God's grace and power, which is made manifest in our times of weaknesses. 1 Corinthians 1:26-29 says, "Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." 2 Corinthians 12:10 says, "That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." In the classic passage in 2 Corinthians 4:7-18, it says, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive, always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may be revealed in our mortal body. So then, death is at work in us, but life is at work in you. Therefore, do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Despite all these encouraging promises from Scripture that God will work all things together for the good, some days can seem like an absolute dumpster fire. Can I get a witness? We can get so down on ourselves and feel so disappointed, not only because we aren't showing up for ourselves the way we want, but we also are not showing up for others the way we want to. We can see so many shining examples of people out in the world doing great and innovative things, and yet we can feel like the only light our life offers is the bright burning fire of our hot mess. However, being a positive role model isn't the only guiding light that can lead someone to a more excellent light. God can use what may seem like a dumpster fire in our lives as a guiding light to deliver someone else from their peril. I like this story I heard of the Norwegian fisherman. A Norwegian fisherman and his 2 sons were out on their daily fishing run. By mid-afternoon, a sharp, brisk wind was whipping salty spray into the faces of the rugged man and his teenage boys. As the wind increased, the waves grew into gray-blue giants. The little boat pitched back and forth as the 3 rowed desperately to get back to shore. The storm was so fierce that it washed out the lighthouse's light on the beach, leaving the fishermen dependent on dark, groping guesswork. Meanwhile, a fire broke out in the rustic cottage where the man's wife and boy's mother awaited them. Unable to put the fire out, the woman watched as the flames destroyed their home and all their earthly possessions. When the father and sons finally safely returned to shore, she waited to deliver the tragic news. Yet even as she told her husband the terrible news of how the fire had destroyed their home and possessions, he seemed strangely unmoved by the loss. It was as though he had never heard the news before. "Didn't you hear me, Carl?" she asked. "Our house is gone." "Yes, I heard you," he said. "But a few hours ago, we were lost at sea, fighting fierce wind and high waves. Our only guide to the shoreline was the lighthouse on the cliff, and then it went out. I was certain we would die. Then I noticed a dim yellow glow in the distance. We turned our boat and rowed toward the light. It grew brighter and brighter, and we followed it safely to the shore. You see, Ingrid," he said, "that little yellow glow was the first sight of our house on fire. At the peak of the blaze, we could see the shoreline as bright as day. The same fire that destroyed our house created a light that saved our lives." I love that story because it just shows us we can't judge things too quickly. We don't know how God will use something that seems bad in our lives to influence or save someone else. So let's just trust God. In closing, let God bake the cake. Let God bake your cake. Every ingredient of your life may not taste good by itself, but once all the ingredients are blended together and given enough time to bake, you will see that God did indeed work all things for the good for those who love Him. Your story isn't over. Jesus is the author and finisher of your story. Keep your eyes on Him and trust Him to complete your story. God bless you.